the FAANG only mindset?
I definitely think this mentality is very unhealthy.
I think you're going to be in for a really bad awakening when you come to the end of the college program and you're not going to have a job.
Amazon India, so many YouTubers on Amazon India, literally the questions they ask are like height of the binary tree, swap the nodes. I cleared all my Google rounds. I got great feedback. Never did CP in my life. Is CP really mandatory in order to crack big tech companies? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Open Source Cafe. I'm super excited for this one because it's like a compilation of all the questions I have been asked over the past few years since I got involved in the tech community and the student community. So we're going to talk about mistakes that students make in their college years, be that with learning or the, how to showcase their skill sets and all these other things. So basically we're going to talk about that. But before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to Rahul and Alex for joining. And I'd like them to introduce themselves. Rahul, take it away.
Well, thanks for having us, Kunal. This is really exciting and really cool to see your growth over the past couple of months. I'm Rahul, and I work with Alex very frequently in building out the tech career growth community, which is the destination for people who want to either break into tech or, once they're in tech, accelerate their career and grow even faster. So I do that and spend a lot of time on that. I work at Facebook as my day job. I primarily do Android stuff. And I also teach at Stanford, where I'm currently teaching the Introduction to Android class at Stanford.
This video is sponsored by Datree, a tool that you can use to prevent Kubernetes misconfigurations from reaching production. Using Datree, you can catch misconfigurations in the development phase and set or create policies to receive failure alerts. It's useful for different stages of deployment and helps you measure resource usage by applying mandatory labels to workloads. 10,000 plus engineers are already using Datree. Check out the links in the description below to get started today. And Rahul also has his amazing YouTube channel, so make sure you check out the links in the description if you want to learn, if you want to get started with Android development. Alex, how about you? Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Alex. I'm currently an Android engineer at Robinhood. Been at Robinhood for around like 6 months now. Before that, I was at Facebook, which is where I met Rahul. I was at Facebook for 4 years. I started off at Facebook working on Portal for a year, video calling device that Facebook shipped around 3 years ago. So that's where I met Rahul. We started at Facebook at roughly the same time. Then I went to Instagram for 3 years. So I worked on the ad side. Before my 4 years at Facebook, I was at an education technology startup called Course Hero for 2 years. I was their first Android engineer and lead, and I built their Android app from scratch. And then before that, I was at PayPal for 1 year as a full stack engineer. And then before PayPal, I was at UCLA, where I got my bachelor's in computer science. On top of my day job, I also just really love doing community service and building mobile apps for fun. I've been building mobile apps for fun, well, since college, actually, since 2013. And I've deployed around like 30 apps to Google Play, and they've gone around 2.3 million installs combined at this point.
Thanks a lot for sharing, both of you, some of the greatest, achievements. Me looking, from like the students' point of view, and this is what I tell students. Like when I'm giving them some advice or something, they're like, "Hey, you are a student. What do you know?" I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let me get some amazing people on the podcast. You can hear from them." And here we are. And regarding the tech career growth community, can you tell us a little bit more about it? And by the way, if you want to join the community, you want to join the Slack channel. The links are in the description below. You can network with some of the amazing people, get some right mentorship and guidance related to your career. But Alex, let me ask you this: from where did this motivation, come from?
Yeah, so Rahul and I have always been big on kind of doing stuff on the side. Like for me, I've been doing the apps on the side. Rahul's been doing his YouTube channel and kind of his Stanford stuff. So we already had that energy. And I think given the situation of the pandemic, it just made a lot of sense to convert that energy into charitable energy. So we saw a big gap in the community, mainly on LinkedIn, because that's the biggest professional community in the world, at least online. And we felt like there were kind of two kinds of advice. The first level advice is more common, this kind of broad, relatively shallow advice, usually oversimplified, misses out on a lot of the nuance. Frankly, oftentimes coming from people who didn't really know what they were talking about. Like either people who weren't very senior or they came from companies that weren't that prestigious. There was another kind of advice, which is more rare, but still a good amount, which I think has come up in recent years, which is very high level advice, very personal, but very narrow, because it would be coming from people like Rahul and myself, kind of tech leads from prestigious companies, but then they would charge like $300 an hour. So in order to get that advice, you had to pay, like a tech lead from Google, like $300 an hour just to talk to them and get that advice. So it was either kind of like high quality but extremely expensive, or like low quality and free. And Rahul and I were like, what if we make something that's both high quality and free, right? So we can take what we've learned across our roughly 15 years in Silicon Valley and doing a lot of, frankly, like pretty successful stuff on the side, and then just give it all away for free. So we started doing that January 2021. So pretty like well into the pandemic time. Still a lot of suffering in the world. And we started giving these sessions to people, these live sessions to people. So like in late January, we gave our first one. We conducted it through Zoom. We still do it through Zoom. Sent out an invite to a bunch of people like, hey, we're going to talk about, for that first one, it was about optimizing for promotion, completely free. And I remember we had like 50 people show up. We were super excited, and it was times were different back then, because since it was a lot smaller, it was more interactive. It was like more of a conversation, but the idea was that it was like it was like free, it was intimate, it was honest, and it wasn't that scripted. Which forced kind of Rahul and I to just be like as honest and kind of laid back and approachable as possible. And yeah, the community's kind of grown like crazy over the past like 8 months or so. Sessions regularly attract between 500 and 900 people now. And the community that we've built on LinkedIn has like 6,300 people. On Slack, it's about 5,000 people. And I think the mission is kind of still the same. Just give extremely high quality tech advice that draws deeply from our plethora of experience in Silicon Valley. Give it all away for free, and lower barriers in tech for everyone without a paywall site.
And I'll add in there, which is that I feel like the way I think about it is that getting a job in tech is kind of like a gold rush. Like there's so many people who want that really stable, high-paying job and a lot of growth opportunity in tech, and all that is true. But as a result of that, what's happening is that it's kind of like a gold rush, and there's a lot of people who are eager to sell you the tools to be able to mine the gold. And frankly, a lot of the tools that people are selling are just not very good. And so that's kind of what, going back to what Alex is saying, is that we thought we could do better than a lot of the advice that was out there for free, and we could make it completely free. And one of the things that I really value about the tech career growth community, and Kunal, I'm sure you're familiar with this too, is that when you're on YouTube or you're on a lot of these other platforms, you're the one kind of broadcasting out information, but there's actually not as much interaction between the people who you're talking to, or maybe you and the people you're talking to. And so one of the things I've really valued about the tech career growth community is that we have around 5,000, 6,000 people on our Slack and LinkedIn, and we're actually able to have conversations with them, either hop on an actual video call or audio call, or just in the channel itself, just kind of have an exchange of ideas. And that's been really fun and helped me a lot also to understand what people want.
Yeah, I believe two-way communication is very important when we are talking about guidance and mentorship. And we'll talk more about that, later. And I really like the point Alex made, which was about like people on LinkedIn giving free advice. That is LinkedIn is something I don't necessarily use because I think it has lost its value, to be quite frank. Right? I mostly network with people that I find in the open source community, that I find on Twitter only, because I can customize my Twitter feed, but I can't customize my LinkedIn feed. LinkedIn will show me what LinkedIn wants to show me. And there's a lot of people who are trying to give these free advices that don't really have any meaning as such. And that's why I always say, like, only take advice from people that you can definitely see, like, okay, these people have made it, right? So you see, like, these people working at big Silicon Valley startups, they have years and years of experience, they're tech leads and stuff. Yeah, go ahead. For example, you won't take open source guidance from someone who has never done open source. It's simple, basic stuff. Cool. So let's move forward. And by the way, all the people who are watching, just join the tech career growth community, because you all ask me this every day. Every day I get like 10s and 20 DMs like, hey, can someone guide us into tech and career and all these things? So here's a community for you, tech career growth. Links in the description, Slack channel, LinkedIn. Go check it out. Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about the topic on discussion, which is some of the mistakes that, let's say, students or new grads make when they're, let's say, starting to learn to code. What, according to you, Rahul, is like the first mistake that the people make when they're learning to code?
Yeah, the first mistake, and probably one of the biggest, in my opinion, is people getting stuck in tutorial hell. So what that means is people will feel good about, okay, I'm going to follow this YouTuber, whether it's me or you or anyone else out there who's like going out and building something, and they'll spend hours and hours following along, and then they'll be done when the tutorial is done. And I feel like there's so much about software engineering and programming that is beyond just following a tutorial, right? In fact, I would say most of the interesting work happens when you take the training wheels off and you're doing something on your own. For example, how do you debug an issue? If you're just following a tutorial, the likelihood of you actually encountering an issue is pretty low because you're blindly copying what the person is doing. Reading the documentation, actually figuring out how something really works, all of that skill you're not really going to get by following a tutorial on YouTube or Udemy or Udacity or whatever it may be. And so, uh, right now I'm teaching the class at Stanford, and I actually literally tell students that if you come to lecture and if you follow the tutorial that I put on YouTube, you're going to get maybe 30 or 40% of the value of this class. The majority of the value, the majority of the benefit that you're going to derive about learning Android or learning any other kind of programming skill is going to be when you actually try and extend the project. Either extend it and like re-architect it, add a new screen, add a new feature, or build a brand new app and do something on your own. Because that's really when you start to struggle and you try and figure out what's happening, what's wrong in your program, that's really where the majority of learning happens. And so I think the big lesson here is that you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? If you're always on this very happy path of following a tutorial, you're really limiting your learning, and that will limit your growth in the tech field.
This video is sponsored by Teleport, enabling engineers to quickly unify access to any computing resource anywhere on the planet. Check out the links in the description below to get started. Are you juggling with shared secrets, SSH keys, or hopping between VPNs and multiple access points? Check out Teleport to quickly access your computing resources from anywhere. Teleport allows engineers and security professionals to unify access for SSH servers, Kubernetes clusters, web applications, and databases across all environments. With a unified resource catalog, there is no need to maintain inventories. You can also work together to troubleshoot a problem with your colleagues on a remote server or on each other's laptops and record these sessions as well using shared sessions. Teleport also provides ready-to-use auth for your internal web applications. Easily implement security and compliance with Teleport to adopt industry best practices for access across all protocols and all environments with minimal configuration. How does it work? Teleport is a single binary which enables secure access to SSH nodes, Kubernetes clusters, web apps, and databases. Deployed as a single binary, it seamlessly integrates with the rest of your stack. Get started with Teleport now and try it for free. Check out the links in the description below for more information. Yeah, I could not agree more. And this is a very funny question that people ask. Hey Kunal, can you suggest me the best resource for web development? Can you suggest me the best resource for Android? I don't think, first of all, there's like a best resource that you can categorize as such, but because everyone learns in a different way. I love learning from documentation, right? Some people love learning from videos. Some people love learning from like interactive tutorials and such. So I totally agree with Rahul's point, and I would love to hear Alex's views on this as well. But yeah, definitely, uh, people say like, hey, I've been studying web development for the past 6 months. I'm not getting anywhere. Well, you're not getting anywhere because you're not applying that anywhere. So make projects,
Exactly.
contribute to open source, teach someone if you want, conduct a workshop. So many ways you can get involved. But yeah, the point that I would like to highlight that Rahul said was, if you don't get stuck, like then you will not learn. Right? Getting stuck is important. If everything is handed over to you, and the spoon feeding in the long run will teach nothing but the shape of the spoon. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree with that. I think what a lot of people are afraid of is they are afraid of going into the unknown, which makes complete sense. I think kind of the human brain is naturally wired to fear things that it hasn't seen before and is not familiar with. But the unfortunate reality is that software engineering does not reward that mentality. In fact, it punishes that mentality. If you have this mentality of always fearing like what you don't know, you're never going to grow. And frankly, the reason why software engineers are paid so highly relative to almost every other profession in the corporate sphere is because it inherently is super chaotic and it's really quickly changing. So in order to be just a decent software engineer, you have to be pretty good at navigating ambiguity and navigating that kind of vague, area. And this is something that Rahul and I kind of, in some ways, we learned the hard way at Facebook, which I would describe as controlled chaos, where it was expected for engineers, especially those trying to grow to like senior lead levels, to navigate a lot of ambiguity. Like you would get like just a couple sentences sometimes where, oh yeah, I want you to build a product as XYZ. That's it. You have this one sentence, build me something. And we just have to do it. Like we had very few guide rails. We didn't have a tutorial that we could follow to build most of what we built at Facebook, obviously. And I know a lot of people want to get into these tech companies. And the reality is, if you want to get into these top tech companies, you have to be extremely comfortable navigating a place where you are unfamiliar with like 90+% of it. That's just how it is.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks a lot for sharing. And when we're speaking about these curriculums, these courses, then one of the this is the second point, the mistake that I see students make is they really value the course completion certificates as such. What are your thoughts on this, Alex?
It's pretty similar to kind of the tutorial point, except that a certificate is probably a little less structured than a tutorial, because a tutorial is like, yeah, you follow these exact steps and do this. Certificate is generally like, you follow some course, but then you maybe have some quiz at the end. You have to do like some studying, and then you get like some sort of, certificate if you get like 70, 80, 90%, 100%, whatever. It's kind of the same thing. A certification is inherently part of a structured environment, because if you have some certification for like Java, you're going to get some test at the end. It might not be exactly the same for every person, because they might have like a pool of questions, and then everyone gets like a subset of that. But in the end, like everyone is still drawing on the same pool of content. Anything that you make for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people has to be standardized in some way. So everyone's experience going through that certification collection process is going to be somewhat standardized and similar. And again, you're kind of nerfing your learning when you're doing these certificates, because you're going through a structured environment. You're not going into the true area of learning for software, which is going into the unknown and navigating ambiguity and building something that doesn't have a clear path forward. You have to figure it out yourself. You have to struggle. So yeah, when it comes to certificates, I firmly believe that you should not get a certification unless it's actually required for a job that you're really passionate about. Like, let's say you're trying to become like an AWS administrator, you're applying to like 5, 10 AWS jobs, and like 80% of them require this particular AWS certification. In that case, get it. But if let's say you want to become a professional Android developer and there's some Android certification, but it's not actually required, and you're just going to get it like, oh, it's going to help me, right? Like get the interview or whatever. I don't think that's true. At least a top employer like Facebook will not really value it, because it's like, okay, yeah, you followed some Android course and got this Android certificate that like 500,000 other people got. Like, how does that make you unique, right? And
Exactly.
from my practical experience, at least in Silicon Valley, I don't know about other markets, I have been on the hiring loop for hundreds upon hundreds of engineers. I was like the first Android engineer at Coursera, so I led the entire Android hiring pipeline there. I have literally never seen a certification or a certificate help anybody in the hiring process ever. Out of like hundreds of applicants, I've never seen a certificate be like, oh yeah, the hiring committee is, oh yeah, he has this certificate and these other candidates don't. Let's like give him the job or give him the interview. I've literally never seen that happen.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that point, and then I'd love to hear like Rahul's views on it, because he teaches on YouTube as well. I believe there are like two types of certifications. One that really, in the exams, it can like relate to the real world, like you mentioned, AWS certifications or Kubernetes certification exams, or Linux Foundation certifications, so on and so forth. The other ones are like the ones you mentioned, course completion certifications like Udemy or something like that. Or if you attended an event, you get the participation certificates and stuff. People are so, I have no idea from where they got this mindset. This person was really, people really say, hey, we're doing your YouTube course, right? So we're learning data structures algorithms on your YouTube channel. Will we get certificate for this? That's what they tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was like, hey, I'm having someone on my channel. He's the, let's say, CEO of MLH or something, right? So a CEO of MLH, and he's a program manager at Microsoft, and all these other big, community leaders, for example. So it's going to be great. You can ask them one-on-one questions. People were like, students, hey, that's cool, but are we going to get certificates for this? Like, why do you want certificate for this? It's literally like a podcast session. So that's sort of like the mindset that people have, even regarding the courses that they are doing. Rahul, what do you think about this?
Yeah, 100% agree. I feel like similar to what we talked about for the tutorial, people being stuck in tutorials, it's like a vanity thing where they want to have like some output, and being able to put that certificate on their LinkedIn or on their resume is like the very clear output of, okay, I did something. Similar to, okay, I finished a tutorial and I can say, okay, I did it. But the vast majority of the value will not come from you having this credential, right? In general, I think if you look at tech, the beauty of what we're doing in software engineering is that there are no gatekeepers, right? You can go out and create value. You can build things on your own. And so like I really would encourage everyone, don't rely on people like me or Kunal or Alex to give you a certificate, right? We're not the gatekeepers. You go out and you can create your own value, build an app which has a ton of people who are using it, and people love the app, and they give you 5-star reviews. That is really, for me, that is super impressive. Whether you got like a top 10% on some JavaScript quiz on LinkedIn, I don't really care about. And I can tell you, at all the companies I've worked at in Silicon Valley, no one really cares about. So really focus on the things that are actually value additive rather than focusing on, some paper.
Couldn't agree more. So please make sure you note that down. That was the second tip. But now both of you have worked at like FAANG level companies, right? And you were in our shoes as well at one time, giving interviews, doing internships, and all these other things. Let's talk a little bit more about, and I don't know about other countries, but in India, this is a major problem. Let me tell you what is happening. I'm not sure if you're aware. Students don't do anything for the 4 years of their college life. They literally won't do anything. They will just do computer programming. They will not do development. They will do some development, let's say, for the project work, but they feel like that computer programming is like this mandatory thing in order to get a role at, let's say, these big tech companies, for example. So you have been on the hiring side. You've been a student as well, I'm sure, in the past. Like you were doing internship, then you joined your new grad roles. Here in India, what is happening is people are really have this mindset that CP is everything. Literally, Amazon India, right? So many YouTubers on Amazon India, literally the questions they ask are like height of the binary tree, a diameter of the binary tree, swap the nodes, get the leaf node, things like this. And people are like, if you don't do CP, if you don't have these good ranks, you will not be able to solve such questions. I cleared all my Google rounds. I got great feedback. I got like from Adobe and all these other companies. Never did CP in my life. And all of these people that I interact with who work at these big companies, they are also saying the same thing. So that's basically what the point of discussion is, Alex. Like, is CP really mandatory in order to crack big tech companies?
Yeah. So of course it varies. Again, I'm speaking from Silicon Valley experience, Rahul as well. So I'm not entirely sure how it works in other job markets. Like maybe like having a certain score helps you on the resume and like at least in the job getting round. But when it comes to the actual execution of the interview, I really don't think competitive programming is necessary. And if it is necessary, then I wouldn't want to work for that company. That just seems like really mean. Like it's overkill. Like as you mentioned, questions like diameter and height of a binary tree, which I'm well acquainted with, these are pretty famous LeetCode problems. You don't need competitive programming to be able to solve those. I think those are like LeetCode Easy and Medium. You can just kind of do LeetCode and use the regular tools like LeetCode, Geeks for Geeks, Google, even Wikipedia. That should be enough. Competitive programming, I think, is just complete overkill. Like it's obviously very competitive. You have so many people doing it. The problems are like pretty much all like LeetCode hard, final boss, like monster level problems. It's just so difficult, but then the yield is also very low. So that's just kind of crazy to me. But it kind of makes sense. I can add like some context here from two different angles. Number one, I am Asian. I'm well aware that the schooling in Asia is quite competitive. Oftentimes there's a stacked rank system. to kind of rank students. You put them against each other. I think since a lot of students grow up used to that culture, competitive programming feels comfortable to them because it's the same thing, right? Like you're stacked ranked against all these other people, do the competitive programming exercise, and you want to be at the top 5%, 1%, whatever, and you feel good by yourself. So that makes sense. But again, you're kind of not really kind of diving into the true spirit of programming, which is you're forging your own path. You're not measuring yourself against others. You're going to an unknown. The second piece of context I have is when Google burst onto the scene like almost 20 years ago, the revelation that they had was like, let's ask these data structures and algorithms problems because they tease out fundamentals, which I kind of agree with. Like I think like the interview process being heavy on DSA, at least for very big tech companies, it's different for startups, makes sense to me. But they did take the extreme because I think the aura around competitive programming actually started in the US. So like they were like, oh yeah, everyone should do competitive programming to like get yourself into like Google, even Facebook, or very early Facebook, etc. But I think the Americans realized over time that competitive programming is like, okay, that's too much. So I think by the time I was leaving UCLA in 2014, competitive programming was like really lost its luster. I knew people who were doing it while I was a student, but by the time I graduated and I started looking for jobs and of course becoming a lead and looking at other people looking for jobs and hiring, it was pretty much vanished. I've gone through so many hundreds of resumes in the past 7 years of working, and maybe like one or two have something competitive programming related, but like 99.8% of them don't, because it's just completely unnecessary. Like to me, I think LeetCode is enough. There's a million other awesome tools. Pick whichever one works for you, but I really don't think you should pick up competitive programming unless, of course, you genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah, and let me just add one quick thing here, which is that I think that there's a pattern. I'll say the same thing now that I said in the past 2 points, which is that go back to what is actually adding value to you and to people in the world, right? And I feel like tutorials, going through any kind of certification, they're not really adding value to anyone. And even with competitive programming, I think that it's a good intellectual exercise, but when you're actually building an app or building a product, competitive programming, in my experience, is way overshooting it. For 99% of the things that you build in an Android app or iOS app or whatever you're trying to really build, you don't need to know how to reverse a linked list or like do some fancy thing with a binary tree, right? And so I really feel like unless you really enjoy the process of going through CP, then it's probably not worth your time if you really just want to land that really good tech job.
Yeah, totally agree. And it reminds me of Alex's point, which was it's like bringing a rocket launcher to a knife fight. Um, so I totally agree with that. Yeah, but yeah, thanks a lot for sharing. I personally have been a victim for this. I was like, okay, I should do CP. CP is the only thing that is going to help me, and it's like the mandatory stuff. But then when I actually got involved in open source, I met so many amazing people who are working at these big tech companies, and I got to hear about their experiences. So there are two ways I was looking at experiences. First, I was like just looking at YouTube, people making videos on their experiences and stuff. I was like, okay, I made it into Amazon, I DirectI or whatever, and I do CP and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna do CP now. Then I started CP. I do data structures, algorithms, and things like that. But then when I actually met these people, they're like, this is not important. And then when I actually got to my Google rounds, I was like, okay, LeetCode was enough. Why are people doing CP? And then I actually looked at all the previous year interview questions of companies like Amazon in India, Microsoft in India. It's like LeetCode Medium. It's literally LeetCode Medium. You don't have to trust me. You just look at yourself, Google right now. So I definitely think like this is something. Let's talk about it, right? The fourth point, right? Your networking skills, building in public, building in public. So this is like the fourth. It's not a mistake, because I know people who, let's say, don't post that much on social media, but are still doing really good in their careers. But it definitely helps in order to get recognition. So it's called learning in public. So Rahul, can you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, this is something that I believe strongly in. I know, Kunal, like both me and you are content creators, right? Like we put ourselves out there, we share what we're doing, and there's so much benefit in that. I really, really encourage everyone you have to just like put yourself out there and share what you're doing. And the couple of reasons. The way I think about it is that you're giving yourself a chance to get lucky. Like you won't really be able to meet interesting people or have these really good outcomes if you're in a corner coding all day, not doing anything, right? Like it's very hard to get noticed, right? And the way you're able to like land that really good job interview or meet that really cool person who can become a mentor, right? The way you do that is by actually putting yourself out there and sharing what you do. And like one way to think about it is the best way to get help, get mentorship is by being interesting, right? Like if you just go out there and say, hey, can you please help me? I'm actually not that inclined to like spend an hour or 2 hours with you. But if you say, hey, I have these 2 or 3 or 4 apps published, I really care about this particular topic in this industry or what, like, something which is like, hey, clearly you've done some work, you're an interesting person, I could learn from you. Then it's way easier to get noticed, to get help. And I feel like you also get a much healthier exchange of ideas when you put out your idea, like, hey, I want to build this, or like, hey, does anyone have experience with this technology? I've been trying this and I'm stuck somewhere. You get a lot of feedback, and that feedback is really what will accelerate your learning. So there's a ton of benefits to putting yourself out there, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, choose whatever platform, find a community and engage with them. There's a ton of value.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the main thing here I've seen is people think that their ideas are actually like super valuable. And this kind of ties into like another aspect of tech where, yeah, there are some ideas that are so extremely unique that they do have a lot of value on their own. I think an example of this would be like Pokemon Go. Before Pokemon Go, there wasn't really any sort of real application that leveraged like augmented reality like that. But when it comes to the vast majority of ideas, they're taking an already existing concept and then they're just refining it. So 99% of the value comes from the execution. Like the difference between Uber and a taxi company, for example, is the contractor model. Like they're using contractors instead of full-time drivers. But I don't think people care about that because that's what's going on underneath the hood. The reason why Uber is successful, in my opinion, is that they have an app, which taxi companies didn't, and it's extremely convenient. And the quality of the app is extremely high. I mean, love or hate like Google, oh, not Google, sorry, Uber. Like you got to admit their app is pretty good. Like the map updates in real time. You just have to click a button in order to get it right. It feels magical. And then the algorithm works in the background to pair you with the driver that's nearby, right? So the idea of like dialing into a service, like for a taxi, you probably have to like call them and then getting someone to drive you somewhere is not an original idea. It's been around for like decades, right? But Uber essentially took that already existing idea and then refined it with high quality execution with technology, right? So what I've seen, this is at every stage in my kind of life in software, college students, coworkers at companies I've worked at, people within tech career growth community, they are really afraid of like sharing what they're building because they think the idea is like so valuable that like if they let people know what they're building, it's going to get stolen and then someone's going to like turn it into a $1 billion company and they're going to be left in the dust, which is like, I understand that. And also I've had like non-tech people have the same mentality where it's like, I'm not a coder, but I have this idea for an app and like, don't tell anyone this. And I haven't really told a lot of people this because it's like, I don't want it to like leak or something and then I'm going to lose out $1 billion. Like there's a 99.9% chance your idea has already been had by someone else on this planet, right? Because there's like 7.8 billion people on Earth, right? It's not original. It's not value. It's not valuable in and of itself, right? Like the way you turn it into something valuable is through the execution, not the idea of the value itself. Like if you have an idea, you should just, even if you haven't built anything, I think you should just share it and then get feedback on the idea because like that's the best time to get feedback. Earlier on in the process is proactive. And Rahul and I are happy to do that in tech career growth community. Like if you have a side project idea, just let us know what it is. And then we can comment on like product market fit and like kind of MVP scoping and all that stuff. And similarly, if you have something that's a work in progress, then like we're happy to try it out, right? You shouldn't just keep it to yourself. You should share it, especially if you're a more junior engineer. Because like if you're a more junior engineer, like the quality of your execution in the beginning is going to be really poor. You're going to have a lot of bugs. You're only going to be having the happy flow working and stuff like that. There's going to be like a lot of holes in your project, I'm sure. Rahul and I can help you with that, right? But we can't help you with that if you build in secret. And then after you finish your MVP and then you launch it, share it on LinkedIn or whatever, it's too late because it's probably like really, really bad because you've been building in secret like this entire time. So yeah, it sounds harsh, but like your idea is probably not valuable on its own. It's not valuable until you actually build a really good product around it. And you build a really good product around it by kind of channeling the power of the community and others around you.
This is what I love about learning in public, which is from a student's point of view, finding the right mentor. You can find a lot of mentors. It's sort of like the decentralized mentorship. Uh, no one really owns it, but you get like a little bit of knowledge from everywhere, and there are facts to prove everything that people are saying. You're guiding me about Android. Cool. Yeah, you work at Facebook about Android. Yeah, what you might be saying. You have years and years of experience. That learning in public mindset and getting mentorship from that, I think that is much more valuable to me as compared to just some, like Alex, you mentioned in the beginning, free advice, right? Like free social media advice, like on LinkedIn. So to be quite frank, yeah, I that's one of the reasons I learn in public, to network with such amazing people and get mentorship from them. And this is going to solve most of the questions you all ask me. Looking at you, people who ask, hey, how do I find the right mentor? Learn in public, get involved, and try to don't just network so that this person will be able to help me in the future to get an internship or whatever. I mean, that's cool. It's fine if you're doing open source and you're getting a job opportunity or an internship out of it. It's great, but actually be interested in their work and like learn from them. Cool. Speaking of learning, when I first stepped into college, right, there's so many things. So should I do web development, mobile, iOS, Android, machine learning, data science, blockchain? So is there like any perfect tech that people can get involved with, or what should the mindset be when you're trying to choose which particular domain you want to specialize in, for example?
Yeah, good question. When it comes to there's just kind of two things here. There's number one is the domain itself. Like, do I want to do like web, machine learning, blockchain, etc. That one is actually a tricky one. I think there's like kind of two components here. I think the number one is choose something you're passionate about. So like, if you like follow crypto, you follow blockchain stuff, then yeah, I think it makes sense to become a blockchain developer. I think passion is one of the most important things when it comes to coding. One mistake I've seen is people will try to find the most practical thing. They're like, among like all these things, like which one will survive like 25 years into the future, and then which ones won't. And then they're trying to find like something that has like the highest safety around it, and then they'll go into it even if it's not something they're truly passionate about. I think that's a mistake. And I think it's frankly like kind of unreasonably greedy. Like, it's software, as mentioned before, it's chaotic. Like, pretty much nothing has a chance. Like, you don't know for sure if anything's going to survive 25 years, right? Like, things can be dead 5 years from now. Like, you don't know. You just kind of have to deal with that. I think just pick something that you're passionate about, ideally something you're close to, and then just do that. And then if it dies, then I mean, pivot. That's kind of on you. That's kind of the expectation for a good software engineer. Like, if your field dies, you have to adapt. And even within your field, like, the technologies and libraries will change all the time, so you're always adapting anyways. And in terms of like closeness, is kind of like, for me, I have a really easy example. I've always been an Android user. I went into Android development in 2013 because I had an Android phone. I was like, all right, I want to build stuff, and then I want to look at it on my phone. I want to be able to easily test it out, play around with it, show it to people. I have this like phone in my pocket, is Android phone, so I chose Android development. And I think that decision, it sounded stupid at the time, but I'm now realizing it was actually genius. I think I still love Android development. That's one of the main reasons why I still love Android development. It's so accessible to me as an Android user. I can easily test stuff on this magical device I have in my pocket. I can easily show people. I can easily show employers during the interview. I've done that. I pulled up my phone, but hey, I built this app. Look at all these features I built, and it's worked out. So that's kind of the first one. Build something that you're passionate about and you're close to. Number two, this is a big one that Rahul mentioned, is if you already have a community around you, like a support network, that's also a really big factor. So that's kind of the second main thing. So like, I think Rahul got into Android development because like he had a network of people around him who were already very good at Android development. So if he went into Android development, it didn't matter if he was struggling a lot or needed help. Like, he could easily find someone that he trusted who could help him with Android development. So that's kind of my thoughts around like how to choose which technical domain or stack to go into. The second one is more tactical. It's like, once you have your domain, like, what libraries and frameworks do I use? And this is something I've seen people struggle with a lot. And it's just a bit kind of silly to me because I think it's a huge waste of time. We get this a lot in tech career growth community, very technical questions where it's like, oh, should I use like, of these like 7 different databases, what should I use? Or like, among these like, 35,000 different JavaScript frameworks, which one should I use? Because like, there's a new JavaScript framework like every day. And my answer is just like, again, it's kind of the same thing. It's like if you, like for example, if you're doing mobile development and you're choosing between like, let's say React Native and native development, and you're already very good at JavaScript, then just do React Native, right? Because it's written in JavaScript, you're already good at JavaScript. Just kind of use that. Like it's all good, at least in the beginning. Like if you just want to build your first mobile app, you don't really have to care about hyper optimizing it. Just build something that will give you the velocity that you're comfortable with. And I think people are just they have this weird perception that there's like this optimal technology that's like better than like all the other technologies. And one of the reasons that, you know, these senior engineers are senior, and especially those who work at like big tech, the reason behind that is they know this like kind of secret information of like which technology is the best, and they're kind of like hiding it and like hoarding it for themselves and not telling the junior developers. That's completely untrue. Yeah, so just when it comes to choosing like the particular library or framework, just pick something you're like comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with any of them because you're completely new, just leverage the community. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know someone who is pretty decent at React Native, and I have no experience with any mobile development whatsoever. Pretty new programming, just pick React Native because you can at least ask that person for React Native help if you're struggling. And then if you don't even have that person, just pick at random. Pretty much, as long as it's like somewhat relevant in the community, like it's been used in the past 10 years, it's probably fine. So like, yeah, don't be using Prolog or something to kind of code your backend. That's probably not going to go well. I don't think there's been like a major Prolog company for like 30 years. But I don't think that's really kind of the risk for anybody. Yeah, just pick something and build stuff. Just build stuff. If there's like kind of one message I have for like any like junior developer, student, anyone early in their career, is just build stuff. The more you spend in decision paralysis, kind of like fretting over all these decisions, like you're just wasting your time, and everyone's just going to go ahead of you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to echo that last point. I really like what Alex said there around just build stuff. Like the more time you waste in deliberation between Java and Kotlin, or React Native and Flutter and native, like, you know, all these different things that people will ask us about all the time, you're not learning that much unless you actually build. So like really you want to fast forward to the building process. And I think there's also this kind of this weird notion that I think people have, which is that, okay, I'm building an app and this app is going to be a really big deal, and it's like my baby, right? I want to make sure that my app, my baby, is going to be taken care of, and I'll do the best thing possible for it. But I think one of the harsh realities that I've come to is that in 1 year, or maybe even 6 months, the majority of the projects people will start right now, they're going to die. And that's actually okay. That's a healthy thing, right? Like Alex and I, Kunal, I'm sure for you as well, we've built out many, many, many apps. And so I think that if you remove the pressure on yourself to pick the perfect thing for this project, and you kind of say, okay, this is one project of many projects I'm going to embark on, I think that really will hopefully relieve the pressure on you to try and get into the decision paralysis that we see so many people fall into. To just pick something and build it. And yeah, things will change, languages, technologies will change, and you will adapt with that. You'll build new things, you'll adapt as you build new things. So that would be my advice.
Thanks for sharing, Rahul and Alex. Some really great advice. And yeah, I totally agree with the point. Like learning, should never stop because these frameworks, libraries, and things will keep changing. Regarding like how I did it, like there's this quote I really like, which is know everything about something and something about everything. So, like the pie-shaped learning. So you have a little bit knowledge of like, okay, I tried mobile development, I tried web development, I tried blockchain. Okay, I don't like blockchain. I won't deep dive into it. Then I tried DevOps. Okay, I love DevOps. I'll deep dive into it. I'll work in that. So I think like, yeah, that along with not doing tutorial hell, I think can do wonders for you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So that was the fifth point. Now the sixth mistake that we see students make is to compare themselves with others. Right. Rahul, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the things here is that the world of tech, the world of software engineering, is so large, and in fact, it's growing larger every single day. The number of people who get into tech, the demand for jobs in tech is expanding. And the consequence of that is that there is no single path. Like obviously you have things, okay, I'm going to be a blockchain developer, a mobile developer, or a backend developer, DevOps. There's so many things. But even within that, like Alex and I are Android people, even within Android, if you work at a company like Facebook or Google, which are these huge companies, you have literally hundreds or thousands of people who are in that domain. And so even within Android, now you have like, okay, I'm going to be an Android UI person. I'm going to be an Android animation person. I'm going to be, an Android performance person. Like there's so many paths within Android now. And so I think to try and look on LinkedIn especially, where it's very much like self-promotion, people post, I happy to announce that I landed this really cool internship or whatever it might be. It's very easy to feel FOMO that, okay, like I'm not doing as good as this person, or I'm not achieving as much as I should be. But the reality is that it's not a zero-sum game. You succeeding doesn't mean that now I lost out on an opportunity or I cannot do as well. The opportunities are expanding, and there are so many ways to achieve success, right? So I just feel like this mentality of, jealousy or feeling bad, it's kind of natural. Like, okay, everyone is doing well and I'm still left behind. I think try not to have that, because the reality is that there are many, many versions of success, especially in tech, which is what I think is really magical about what we're all doing.
I believe people only see the end picture and not the path of that person, because everyone was a beginner once, right? So instead of comparing yourself with others, I believe the word we are looking for over here is you should get motivated. So you should network with them. You should see, okay, can you maybe help me, and how did you make it? Some advice or something.
Yeah, when it comes to comparing yourself to others, of course, I think it's not just in tech, it's just unhealthy anywhere, really. And one piece of advice I have here actually is to kind of channel that into positive energy. So instead of looking at other people succeeding and then feeling bad about yourself, you should look at other people succeeding and then kind of turn that into motivation. Because at least for me, when I see all these people who are like 5, 10, 20x stronger than me, which is something I had to get used to at Facebook, it's feels kind of magical in my opinion, where it's like I'll think to myself, I'm working in a place where like I've already put in so much effort and I've done this, which I'm proud of. Being able to make peace with your current and cost is very, very important. But it's like I can get so much better. Like I can be as good as these people if I keep going and command like the same level of respect and efficiency that they do, which to me is like kind of amazing, because I don't think there's any sort of like field that's like this. And if so, it's probably like, few and far between. So that's kind of like my recommendation for people who are essentially like kind of coveting what other people are having. Turn that into motivation and just kind of use that to realize the beauty of this space. Like the ceiling for software is infinitely high. And I remember there's this really good interview that Steve Jobs did where he was talking about hiring at the early days of Apple. But he was explaining that software is really unique because the best software engineer in the world is not just like 2 or 3x better than the worst software engineer in the world, right? They're like 1,000x better. And I saw that at Facebook. Like when you work at these companies like Facebook, Google, like you'll see what I mean when you have engineers that just don't feel human, like they feel like almost like a god. And Steve Jobs was mentioning like for most crafts this is not the case. Like let's say you have a taxi driver. Let's say you go to New York City, you want a taxi. You want to go from point A to point B. It's like 5 miles, right? Like the worst taxi driver that you can find, because again there's kind of a floor there because they need to have a license and whatnot. Like maybe they can get you there. Let's just make up a number, like in 40 minutes, right? The best taxi driver in all New York City, maybe can get you in 15, 20 minutes, right? Because they still have to follow the laws of physics and traffic, right? So like maybe a 2 or 2.5x improvement for the absolute best taxi driver in NYC, right? And that's how it is for like most other fields. Like you have a lot of physical limits on like how good the best can possibly be. But when it comes to software, it's not just 2.5x. It's like 10, 100, 1,000x, like the best software engineer in the world, like compared to you. And I think a very concrete example for Android and for me and Rahul is like Jake Gordon. Like his efficiency is absolutely incomprehensible. Like he's built like 50 different open source libraries that each have like 10,000 stars, and they have beautiful APIs and they're so useful. And it's not like he's 80 or something, right? Like he's only been doing Android for 15 years because Android's only 15 years old, and he's been able to have this like level of efficiency, which is like, to me, that's just, how can you not look at that and be like, this is amazing? Like I love being in the space where I am. That's just incredible.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example, Alex. Thanks a lot for sharing. Really great points. All right. Moving forward, we have 4 more points remaining. So the next one is, we talked about networking. We talked about learning in public. We talked about collaborating with others and all these other things. When you're learning something, you definitely get stuck, right? When you're asking someone when you want mentorship, you definitely would ask questions. One problem that I see, that students face is they don't know how to ask the right questions. They are lacking the communication skills. So for example, someone just sends you a hi, right, and then nothing else. Or if someone just sends you, hey, can you help me in Android, or can you help me in this program, like which part, right? What do you want me to explain? Like, we are texting right now, do you want me to explain the entire code sample on text? That's not possible. So what do you think about this, right, Rahul, the communication practices?
Yeah, this is so important. And I actually made a whole YouTube video about this topic, which is how do you ask good questions in tech? Because I feel like this is so common where like people will just message and say hello. And there's like an expectation of you saying, okay, hello, how are you? Like, what do you need help with? Right. And I feel like the main takeaway that I wanted to deliver in that video that I made about asking a questions is around you have to make it easy for people to help you. That's the key thing. If you want to get help, make it easier for people to help you. And the way you do that is reduce the number of back and forth that you have, right? Because like people who you're asking for help, they're probably busy people. They probably have a lot of people who are asking them for advice or thoughts. And so like if you just say hello, like you're now putting the burden on them to reply and like be able to get information out of you. So a much better way of doing it is just in your immediate initial request, you say, hey, here's the problem I'm having. Here's what I've tried. Here's what's happening right now. And here's what I'd like to have happen. Do you think you could point me to any resources that you could that you know about which would help? And that way, like you have a much higher conversion rate of actually getting help. So I feel like that's a big part of being able to get yourself unstuck and unblocked is by actually being able to ask effective questions such that you can get help. And I think there's also a broader point here, which is that I think effective communication is so critical, not only to be able to learn, but also to succeed in your job, especially as you think about more senior levels in tech. Like if you work at Amazon, Microsoft, these huge companies, I would say that in some ways, the way you communicate and how you communicate is arguably more important than the actual code you write as a software engineer. Because when you work at these big companies, a lot of the problem will not actually be like writing the code. That actually turns out to be the straightforward part. The harder part becomes how do you get alignment? How do you make sure that people on the team are unblocked and they know what they're working on and it actually will add up to a delivered high quality project? And that's really where verbal communication, written communication, being able to make sure you understand the concerns of your team or other people on different teams, that becomes really essential to actually succeeding. It's like cultivating that skill of asking questions, communicating clearly, writing, reading, all that you can actually do right now. Again, it's like coding. There's no gatekeeper. Go ahead and write a post on LinkedIn or Twitter and try and really communicate your thought concisely and clearly. And I feel like that'll pay a lot of dividends long term.
Yeah, like adding on to that, like, yeah, I could easily write a book about effective communication. I feel like I learned a lot at Facebook in particular about like how important communication was, and it was like definitely underrated from my perspective going into Facebook. Rahul, we should probably give a session about this at some point. It's been a long time coming for the Tech Hero Growth community. So I'm not going to kind of go on a huge tangent about communication, but I do want to add something to tactical to the question asking part in particular. This is something that I think is really important. And the concept is called input in, output out. The idea is like, if you're putting in a small amount of input, expect a small amount of output. And this applies to questions in that if you ask what is frankly like a lazy question, then you're going to get either no answer or a lazy answer, right? So here's an example. Let's say I need help debugging something. And my question is, I'm building an Android app, and now it's this image loading piece is crashing. What do I do, right? So that input is very low. You haven't attached any resources. It's more or less just one sentence, right? And if you think about it from the answerer's perspective, they have to do so many things. Number one, what does the code look like? What's the stack trace of the crash? What image library, like what image loading library are you using, if at all, right? They need to figure out all these things in order to give you an actual answer. So it's not proportional. Like the amount of output that they would have to generate in order to answer your question is way larger than the amount of input you put in asking the question, right? And this is just going to lead to you not getting an answer. So you essentially just wasted your time. Like, unless you find some really, really, really nice person who goes through all those hoops to figure out what the heck you're talking about to answer your question, right? So if you're like a student, junior developer, someone early on in their career, have this in mind. A couple tips is just the first Google search test, I think, is very easy. Before you ask, like post your question, just put your question into Google, go through the first round of resources, and then attach those resources to your question, where it's like, hey, I have this problem. I looked on Google. I tried these top things from Google and like got this result. So, you don't have to do this question answer. Like I've already done the initial Google stuff. I need something deeper than that. Right. So that extra 10 to 15 minutes of effort, that helps out a lot, because it makes the job easier for the answerer. And then it's also like a token of trust, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm not just trying to like essentially just steal your time without being considerate, right? Like I'm legitimately struggling here, and I've put in the time, because I want to save your time by essentially trying to front load some of the work myself. But yeah, now I genuinely need help, right? I'm not just trying to be like inconsiderate and just like take someone else's time. So yeah, just try to pass the first round Google test for your questions, please. And I've been thinking about writing a Medium article about this, because yeah, we have like 5,000 people asking questions in our Slack community now, and I think some people do not realize that this is something that they should be doing.
I think it's also going to help the person themselves. If there's the rubber ducking technique, right? So if you explain something to a rubber duck, you might get your answer. So it's definitely going to help you as well, because you'll be brainstorming, you'll be researching, and then you'll get your answer. So you'll learn rather than someone giving you the answer. So one more pattern that I have seen in, let's say, some open source community and stuff, when you do ask such questions, they're not going to give direct answers. They're going to point you to some resources. That happens oftentimes. So they're like, okay, these are the resources. Hey, you'll find your answer. Go look. Cool. Rahul, you've been working in education. You teach at Stanford, right? And I see like students who studying computer science and stuff, who want to do, have a career in computer science. They feel like, sometimes this is the next, mistake that I feel like students make, is skipping college subjects. Some of the college subjects are, I believe, important. Like if you're going to development, like databases, operating system, data structures, networking, basic stuff. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like going back to the tutorial hell and credential hell, like the certification hell, I feel like college is really a glorified credential, right? Like you're basically spending 3, 4, 5 years of your life in order to get that piece of paper at the end, which says that, hey, you've done the requisite work in order to, you have some basic understanding of these subjects. And similar to what we talked about, I feel like the value of that is actually going down when you have things like YouTube or people who are giving out information and knowledge for free. The value of this whole institutional learning is actually not that much, especially in software, where again, I feel like a broken record. Like there's no gatekeeper, right? You don't need to go to college in order to become a good software engineer. In fact, some of the best people who I worked with at Pinterest or Facebook are people who didn't necessarily get a computer science degree, or maybe even didn't even go to college, right? And so a lot of the learning will happen on your own when you put in your own time, when you struggle, right? And if you just say, okay, I'm going to go to whatever, like the operating systems class in college or the compilers class, and you just sit and lecture, you're not going to learn that much. You're not going to learn anything about compilers. The real learning will happen when you actually build your own compiler, when you actually try and debug something that's happening with the problem set or the assignment, right? And so I feel like if you're relying on the college to give you that job, if you're relying on college to be able to make you that really amazing programmer, I think you're going to be in for a really bad awakening when you come to the end of the college program and you're not going to have a job. So I feel like you have to be empowered to put it into your own hands and really do that learning on your own. That's really, I mean, I think college can be used as a guide rail, right? Like you can use the people around you, the smart people, the friends that you have to help accelerate your learning, but that alone will not make you an amazing software engineer.
Yeah, I'm never making a guidance video again, because this video contains it all. Very happy that these points are, something we're discussing, and this is the only video you need. As always, any mentorship or guidance you need, like we discussed in this section, you're gonna get it via the people, in the community. But yeah, before moving on to Alex, yeah, I totally agree with your point. My college attendance is 0. I don't go to college, and yet my even though I'm enrolled, it's like I don't really attend classes or lectures that much, because I don't really find that much value. But the funny thing is, I'm getting good marks. I got a 9.4 GPA in the last semester. Did not attend a single lecture. Why is that happening? I think like these subjects, like if you're interested in these, if you're interested in database or whatever, I don't wait. Like, this is the pattern I follow. I'm not like, okay, in 6th semester we'll be learning databases, so I'll do it in 6th semester. No, I want to make an app right now. I'll learn it right now on my own. So it's not like I'm not studying for college. And I love your point, Rahul. Like, if you rely heavily on college, like this is what I did in my freshman year. Like, I did not I'm not saying CGPA is not important. It is important in some cases. Like, I know some companies have some cutoff for CGPAs, and if you're planning on doing masters or something, I think there it's important. Sometimes. So I think, like, to sum up, I am more than happy with a 8.3 overall grade and a lot of open source experience and community work, rather than a 9 point something GPA and none of those. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
And actually, I would argue that I would say that the 8.3 with a ton of experience in open source or your own projects, that in my mind is more valuable than someone who has like a 9.3 or 9.5 and none of the extra work, right? In some ways, the fact that you did your own thing and you actually clearly are contributing to production level code in open source, that's a much stronger hiring signal for me compared to, you spent an extra couple hours studying and you got a higher grade.
Yeah, that is proven to be true, like in my experience as well. Like, I got reached out by Facebook as well because I contributed to the Jest project. That was fun. And then I worked with their intern team for like for the fellowship, where I was doing some production engineering stuff. But open source can open a lot of doors for you. This is for students who don't get much on-campus opportunities. So, like, learning in public and things that we mentioned, it has like changed my life around. I owe a lot to the community. I owe a lot to open source. I think definitely try to think about it. It's definitely going to help you. Alex, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my mentality around college is a bit more nuanced, but I think it's largely aligned with what you two have said. I definitely think college is a glorified credential. It's kind of an antiquated way to kind of gauge the strength of a candidate. But of course, it still is quite important. Like, I've said this before in tech career growth community with Rahul, is like, we're not going to oversimplify advice and just be like, for everyone, it is the right thing to not go to a single lecture and then you'll be fine, right? That's not the case for everyone, right? Like, do what it takes to survive. So generally there is like some sort of GPA that is like respected among companies. So in the US, GPA is out of 4.0. Generally, you want at least above a 3.0. So my recommendation is do what it takes to get that 3.0 or above, but then divert all your other resources, like mainly your time, into something more practical. And this is kind of a very tactical piece of advice I have, which is kind of stemming from my own learning. Is so one thing I'm really happy I did is I started building practical projects in college. I didn't wait until graduating. I was building Android apps for fun when I had around a year left of college, so like rising senior. I wish I had done it earlier, because that's when I think the real learning and like kind of the real beauty of like your power as a software engineer comes out. Like, actually building practical applications that are deployed to production and used by people. I kind of regret not starting earlier. Maybe I could have gotten like many more tens of thousands of users if I had started in like sophomore or even like freshman year. And then that would have made hiring a lot easier, because I had a lot of trouble getting my first job out of school. But yeah, my advice is like, I think a lot of people, they kind of treat school as, like they have to go to every lecture and follow all the rules and, be obedient and like do all these things, right? They're looking for that structure, which you'll get prior to college, like high school and stuff. But when it comes to software, it doesn't work anymore, right? If you feel like the lectures are helpful, then by all means go to them. Like, if you feel like you're going to a lecture, you're absorbing the material, and then you're like now able to like solve these problems when you couldn't before, then by all means do it. But then a lot of people are not going to get that from lecture, right? They'll be like, well, this is explained in a way too esoteric a way. I'm just going to like, self-learn. I'll find some other resource that explains like machine learning to me on Udemy or something, or YouTube, or I'll just like start hacking together something in TensorFlow, right? That's how I'm going to learn machine learning, right? So do what you can, like do what makes sense for you. Don't just kind of follow all the guidelines of school religiously, and then work backwards from like, what you want to accomplish, and keep an eye on your time management, right? Essentially, like what a muscle that every person should have is like, okay, I just came out of this thing. I spent 2 hours here. What was the yield, right? If the yield was high, keep doing the thing. But if the yield was low, stop doing the thing, right? And that's oftentimes going to apply to college lecture. Like I went to so many college lectures and I was like, yeah, the way the professor's explaining it, I'm sorry, like I just don't get what's going on. Like, I need another way to learn this material. Like, there's no point for me to just sit there for an hour and learn nothing.
No, I totally agree with the point. Couldn't agree more. Totally understandable. Yeah. If you are finding values in lectures, go ahead. if you're not, maybe self-study is the way. All right. One more point like I personally like to mention is I think it's a really big mistake that people make. Um, Students specifically, it's the FAANG only mindset, right? So people say that there are so many less opportunities. And I'm like, why? Then like, okay, because these companies only hire these many people. And they're like, I only want to do FAANG. And now I'm not saying that having goals is not right. Having a particular company as your dream company is not right. I mean, that's cool. But this is for like the more general people who are not aware of the reality. Let's say like, okay, FAANG is great. You get some great perks and benefits, salary, work-life balance, getting to work on great projects. But is that the end of the tech world? Is it not true that many other companies might be available over there that do offer these same incentives, that do offer this excitement, the work-life balance, the salary, the all these other major benefits? There's something that I found out to be true. Yeah, there are plenty, and to be quite frank, like this FAANG only mindset, I think like it's not good. Like if you are not really concerned about one particular company, but just like the herd mentality, I think that's the thing. But what do you think? You all work at Facebook, right? What do you think?
Yeah, so I can comment on this because I actually left FAANG, right? So I work at Robinhood now, which is not part of FAANG. There's no R there. After being at Facebook for 4 years, I definitely think this mentality is very unhealthy. I think just from like my experience with kind of folks from my cultural background in particular, I think it's kind of a carryover. So like growing up as an Asian student, my goal was to get into the best college, right? And many other Asian students around me had the exact same mentality. That pretty much drove your entire life, right? Like my goal, by the time I'm 18, is to get into a very prestigious United States university, and everything in your life is dedicated to that. And that's essentially carrying over into your work life, right? It's like, instead of this top college, and I just want to get into a top company. And I think it's just a very toxic mentality because it gives you huge tunnel vision. It makes you really competitive. That kind of weighing yourself against others thing really comes to bite you, because then you're just going to look at all the people who are in big tech and be like, man, like I want to be in big tech. Like, I'm so sad. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to get there, right? And it's just horrible for your mental health. And as you mentioned, is like there are companies that have similar levels of kind of, the prestige is not there because it's not as big, but in terms of like all the actual stuff that helps you, which is like your pay and your work-life balance and the learning, which I think is the most valuable of the learn from the coworkers. Like there are many other companies that can do that, especially now, because like as we all know, software is booming. There's a new unicorn every 30 seconds, right? There's amazing startup after amazing startup being minted, constantly, right? And it's not like these startups are like, man, I don't know how to be good until I am as big as Google, right? Like a lot of these startups are founded and the founders come from Facebook or Google, and they start essentially emulating the awesome parts of those companies right off the bat, right? They have extremely competitive pay. They only hire the best. They have a very kind of thorough interview process to make sure that they really only get the best people, so that if you get hired into that startup, you're learning from the best people, right? And that's kind of the case for me. Like I wouldn't go to Robinhood if I felt like it was worse than Facebook.
Yeah.
I think the people at Robinhood are tremendously talented. I love working here. I am learning constantly from the people around me. It's definitely like at least as good as Facebook, and it's not a big tech company. Well, we're public now, but it's not like $1 trillion, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's like you don't want to essentially have this alias of like, okay, this very specific thing equals good, right? You want to work backwards from the actual concrete stuff, which is your goals, right? So for most people, the goal is to learn from the best and become the best software engineer they can be. So if that's your goal, then what you should be doing is just look for people that you can learn from, and they can be anywhere. And I actually think that like it's actually unhealthy to only work for big tech. I think people will realize this after they go to big tech, myself included, is like when you go to big tech, you're only getting one piece of the puzzle, which is like you already have this big established product. How do you evolve it? But there's an entire, like journey before that, which is how do you go from 0 users to 1 billion users, right? Facebook already has 1 billion users. So of course, going from 1 billion to 2 billion users, you learn a lot doing that, but you're missing out on like a lot of the product lifecycle, which is, well, how do you get from 0 to even 1 million users or 5 million users, right? And that's one of the reasons why I've kind of jumped around a lot across company types. Like I was at a 50-person startup in Course Hero, and then I was at like a 5,000 person company in PayPal. I was at like a 40,000 person company in Facebook, and now I'm at like a 2,500 person company in Robinhood. And I think the learnings I've gotten at each company has been different, and it's been really, really valuable to me.
One thing I would like to ask specifically, like Rahul, you work at like Facebook, and Alex, you have had experience with all these other companies. In no way am I saying like don't apply to FAANG. I never say that, right? I am only saying think outside the box. Like FAANG is great. Apply, send in your resumes and give all your interviews. Obviously it's FAANG for a reason. It's popular for a reason because they offer so many nice things, both in terms of life balance, pay, and things you get to learn and the tech you get to work with. So in no way I'm saying don't apply to FAANG. My only point of argument, for students is that please apply outside of it as well. If that is what you think, like don't measure success of your computer science bachelor's degree equal to FAANG. Is that what I'm saying? Because the thing is that now that I have had some experience working with startups, I am specifically talking from the Indian standpoint, right? I'm not talking about the FAANG campuses outside India. So now that I have seen, like when I've compared the products that we have here in FAANG India, the pay that they give FAANG Indian employees, the the stock options or whatever, the additional benefits, the work-life balance, and all these things, it's amazing. But I have a question this for you. I am not sure what the hype is about, because I'm getting like even things better than this at other, like say remote work or some other tech startups around the world. So I'm really not sure why students just go with this FAANG mentality. I'm not sure about how students are outside India, and I don't like to share about things I have no experience with. But in India specifically, like after checking all the stats and stuff, it's great. But I'm not able to understand what the hype is about because it's pretty average in terms of the packages, compensation, and all these other things. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like FAANG should not be the be all end all, whether you're in India or the US or somewhere else in the world. There is a infatuation with these big tech companies, and I think that's pretty unhealthy because there's a ton of other companies that have a lot of value. And in fact, I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, is that in some ways, when you're early on in your career, it might be better to work at a smaller company where it's potentially more opportunity, right? Because I think the way you grow, the way you're able to level up, get promoted, and become a better engineer is when you start to tackle problems of larger and larger scope, right? And so what might happen is if you go, I'm not saying this definitely will happen, but if you go to a big company like Amazon or Microsoft as a fresh new grad, then you'll be given one small widget, right? Like, okay, here's this very small component, and you're going to work on that for the next 1 year, doing bug fixes and maintenance. And frankly, it's not that interesting, and you're not going to learn that much, right? Like, there's not that much, it's not that hard of a job. And so I feel like what you really want is you want to go to a company which they have way too much work to do and not enough people to do it. So then you're an opportunity now to say, hey, I'm really good. I know I can learn really quickly. Let me try and do as much as I can. And that's really, even though it might be uncomfortable, that high growth company, that high growth startup, that is really where I think that you'll learn a lot. And I'm not saying I think the amazing thing about FAANG or Facebook is that some of these companies like Google or Facebook, their revenues are actually growing 30% year over year, even though they're already enormous. So I think that there is opportunity there as well. But I think that there's also that opportunity at many other companies.
And specifically speaking about, let's say, internships, there's one of my friends who was interning at Facebook and then Microsoft, and there's other friend of mine who was interning at Google. They were like, as an intern, you don't even get to work on the core tech. You're just working on some side library and stuff. And he told me like he was working on some side project and stuff, and not the core tech itself. And most of the first few weeks are spent in like training and stuff. But as compared to like a startup, it's like more flexible. Like you have the freedom of choice. Like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to get out of this internship? What do you want to learn? Things like that. I'm not saying like, please don't say Kunal is saying FAANG internships are not good. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just echoing what Rahul said, like the amount of experience that you get. It's like different experiences you get with different companies, to sum it up.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, at a startup, like they can't afford to have you do this toy project, which no one's going to use. Right. So you actually are going to be thrown into the deep end, and you're going to either sink or swim. And I feel like that's actually often where the majority of learning happens.
Most definitely. All right. Last point, mistake number 10 that I see students make is not being able to find the right mentor. So we also talked about, like, all these other things, like how to connect with people, how to network, but this is the biggest problem, at least what I see in the Indian student community. It's again the herd mentality. If someone is saying like, hey, I'm saying it to you because I work at Amazon, for example, that hey, CP is mandatory, people just leave everything and they do CP. If someone is saying like, you remember what happened last year with Hacktoberfest, right? Like many students were making spammy pull requests just to get that Hacktoberfest t-shirt. Hacktoberfest is like an event by DigitalOcean, and it was like a chaos in open source world. Everyone was making spammy pull requests. The reason that happened because some of a YouTuber who has like 1 million subscribers or something, he made a point like, hey, he literally made a tutorial like, hey, here's how you make a spammy pull request and you'll get a free t-shirt. Because in Hacktoberfest, in the dashboard, you just have to count 5 pull requests. Now Hacktoberfest, like, it's again coming because it's October. They have made this strict rule that if you make 2 spammy pull requests, you will be banned forever. So people who are looking to participate, please make sure you don't spam the open source community. But this was a great example, like how do you find the right mentor, be that in open source, be that in tech, be that with your career or whatever. I can put forward my views, then you can put forward yours. I look at like the proof, for example, like, okay, if I'm getting some mentorship related to cloud native, right? So I'm directly jumping onto the CNCF Slack. That's where I get the mentorship. I directly jump onto the for example, KubeCon, right? The conference. So I network with the people over there. They are some of the brilliant cloud native minds, contributing to open source in the Kubernetes project, joining various SIGs, office hours, for example, because I know these people work there day and night, right? And they are, like, they are the ones who are the community behind cloud native. So I take directly mentorship from them rather than following I don't know if I should say this, a clickbait video, for example, like make $1 million in a year or something. But what do you think about finding the right mentor? Maybe you can go with Alex, then Rahul.
Yeah, so this is a great question. It's also very tricky. I have a lot more advice about avoiding the wrong mentors versus finding the right mentor. So when it comes to avoiding the wrong mentors, which is a big reason why Rahul and I are here, is because like we wanted to be non-toxic mentors. Like we wanted to be good mentors, right? And my advice is if you're looking at any sort of someone who's trying to be a mentor, especially like these LinkedIn influencers, and there's no nuance in the advice they share, they're probably a toxic mentor. And this is stuff that frustrated me so much, which is why I created Tech Career Growth Community. One of the reasons why I created Tech Career Growth Community, Rahul. Like you have people who it's like, yeah, you got to wake up at 4 a.m. every day, or you got to write a 2-page cover letter to every job you apply to. Like if you do these things, like you will succeed, right? And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, yeah, it works for some people. Some people can wake up at 4 a.m. every day and be super productive. I think like The Rock does it for his workout routine or something, right? And everyone loves The Rock, but not everyone is The Rock, right? So like these like very global pieces of advice that have no nuance to them, like they're pretty much all complete trash, right? And Rahul even sent one to me recently where it's like, do this one side project to find a job. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, there's this one project that magically gets you a job. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because like, once it becomes a commodity, like, yeah, maybe the first 500 people do the side project look cool because it's a unique side project. But if 500,000 people do it, then like it's worthless to an employer, right? It's like everyone else has already done it. Why would I hire you over the 500 people, other people who also did this project, right? And that is something that Rahul and I really try to champion in the Tech Career Growth community. Like we always have nuance. Like we'll give advice. We'll be like, you should do X, Y, and Z, but for a lot of pieces of advice, we go like, hey, this might not be the best thing for you. Here are like some other levers to like, improve your resume or allocate your time, right? Like everyone works different, and we always try to capture the nuance when we give advice. Like we will pretty much never give blanket statements like you got to wake up at 4 a.m. every day in order to succeed. When it comes to finding the right mentor, I actually would flip that a bit, especially if you're on the more junior side. Like there's a lot of very junior people looking for mentors. You don't have to look for a mentor, just look for a peer. So like, because if you're looking for a mentor, you're kind of envisioning someone who's like way more wise and senior than you, and then you have like one-on-ones with them and stuff like that. You're asking for their time. It's not reasonable for everyone to be able to find a mentor. So if you can't do that, just look for peers, and there's many other places to find peers, right? Find someone with like, roughly the same equal standing or skill level as you. And that doesn't mean you can't learn from them, right? Like oftentimes people of similar skill levels can learn from each other. And I think tech career growth community is a great place to do that. Open source community is a great place to do that. Just put yourself out there. And reciprocate. Like if someone helps you, try to help them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick. I know that we're almost at time. So I think that, I agree with what Alex said. One way to find a mentor is to be mentorable. Well, what that means is like be interesting. Show that you're willing to work hard. Show that you've actually done the work, right? That's kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. Like put out, like build in public. Say, hey, I've been working on this thing and I think it's really interesting. I'm stuck here. Can anyone help? That's like a much better way of inviting a mentor or at least some help compared to saying, hey, can I get a mentor, please? Like that's a very ineffective way to actually find someone who's willing to help you. And then I think this is also a good note to end on, which is that, tech career growth community. Like the reason Alex and I started this whole community is that we thought that there was a lack of really good mentorship that was actually helpful for many people. So I think it's another plug for kind of what we're building. Would love to have anyone watching to join us.
Yeah, do it right now. The links are in the description. Make sure you join the Slack channel and follow, on LinkedIn, and do get involved. Please follow these all good practices in the tech career growth community as well, like good communication skills. I'd like to add on to that last point. One more thing I definitely is like something that I definitely look for when I was looking for mentorship and guidance is action items. So if your advice does not have an action item, like what use does it have for me? If you're saying something like, hey, be positive, be confident, you can do it, you can do that, or make it, break it, things like that. I mean, fine, might work for some people, not me. I need action items. I need what to do. Like that's fine, I know that I have to be positive, I have to work hard, but what is the roadmap? Like Fordo and stuff that people say here. But anyway, cool, thanks a lot for sharing, Alex and Rahul. Really appreciate it. By far the best podcast I have ever done on my channel, and it's going to be helping students for years and years to come. Really appreciate it. And for everyone else as well, please make sure you check out the links in the description, and make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and share it with your friends so that they can also learn about all these valuable insights and apply them in their life and their career. Thanks a lot for joining. Make sure you check out the links in the description once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Hi, thanks everyone.
Bye. Thanks for having us.